Hello, this is Dr. Gianna
And Dr.
from
Kevin.
the Harmony Center for Whole Being, Network Spinal Chiropractic Care in Oakland, California. And we have the wonderful Radhika here today with us, beloved practice member. And Radhika, you've been coming to the Harmony Center, experiencing Network Spinal Care now for about a year and a half.
Yeah,
It's amazing.
and believe it feels both short and long at the same time.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I feel that too. So today we are excited to hear your story and would love to hear you start by sharing what you remember from a year and a half ago that brought you here in the first place. What were you
Mhm.
experiencing? What were you searching for? And why did you get started here?
Yeah, so I think um, two things, two kind of arcs come to mind. So before coming to Harmony Center, I was already working on myself from like 2022, early 2022 onwards, started with like trauma healing. 2023 was like a year of like running and training. Um, and so last year, I had committed to doing a half marathon. And a few weeks before that, I experienced this pain in my right shoulder. And initially, I thought it was just like, oh, I slept wrong. Yeah, that happens. It'll be fine. And then usually goes away in like 48 hours. It did not. Um, And I was like thinking through, like, okay, how do I solve for this pain before my very, very long run? And I remembered I had mentioned the space. And honestly, I came in thinking it was just for like pain relief, right? But it ended up being so much more than that. Kevin, I don't know if you remember like my first entrainment session, but during like after it, I was like, yeah, I think I kind of relaxed. And you were very skeptical because I think you felt like how much my body had relaxed. Your answer was like, just. And it took me like a few minutes after. I remember going down and then feeling like this like weightlessness and it was, yeah, that I think that was the moment something shifted in me.
Mm,
Cool story.
I
I
love
love
that.
hearing that.
And that's such a common experience too, is like a lot of people will sit up for the first time and they'll usually report feeling more relaxed, but sometimes it varies. But as the practitioner, we can really sense when the tension levels drop and the nervous system shifts into a completely different state. So I love
Yeah.
Cool. So, you've been under care for a year and a half now. Our next question is, what do you feel is like the most significant transformation in how you experience your life now as a result of this continuous care?
um yeah. I mean there've been so many, so picking one is hard, but I think like the theme is I've just built a lot more body awareness. So, and what's been interesting is the more in tune I got with my body, the more just like things I used to do felt new again. So, like yoga, and
Mm,
like suddenly having body awareness while doing postures change. Like, that's what yoga is about. Same with like running, and I still remember it didn't even take that long because it was mid-March last year. I was in New York. Um, I went for a run in Central Park. It had always been my dream to be like fit enough to like run a loop of Central Park. And around like mile 4, there's this uphill, and course, I was a little tired. But I did like a quick body scan and I realized like, no, my legs were not tired. I was holding tension in my upper body, like just anticipating like, oh my God, I can't do this uphill, like all these things in my head. And it just took like a second to like reset that and just jog uphill. And it didn't take much. It was just like, okay, forget what your mind is saying, scan your body and like identify what you're sensing. And that's just become like a daily practice now.
Hmm.
mm.
That's so awesome.
I love that.
I just had a memory too from your first visit of you sharing about how like that ability to scan and connect with your body was hard for you to access. So that is
Yeah.
huge. Yeah. And I know how much of a resource that is for you now, in the way you live. So that's awesome.
And yeah, when I hear you say that, what I hear is like you have this capacity to access safety in your own body. Like there's no threat from the challenge or the stress of climbing up this hill. Like you're able to actually scan your body, assess, and be like, actually, no, we're good. And when we have that foundational sense of connection with our body, our sense of safety, then we access all this increased
Yeah.
capacity to experience more of whatever is happening in that moment. So I love that.
Yeah, I almost feel like for me the transformation has kind of been like bottom up. So like it was easier to like get to like my core, even the SRI, like I was always more connected to like my sacral kind of like center, solar plexus, and then slowly the upper body. And I feel like I'm still working on like the neck and jaw and that's probably a little bit more of like, being a little I don't know if it's that confident is not the word, but that's coming to mind of like speaking up or speaking out. And so like
Mm.
that's the part I'm hoping, over time I also unlock. Uh, but yeah, it's also um interesting to see like especially for me it's been this bottom up, so now sometimes I can almost scan in the same way and like realize where am I stuck, and then some of those I was like, oh, I've been here before and I've been beyond that before, so we will get back there.
Mm, awesome. Amazing. Are there any things that people in your life have reflected to you that have been different or changed over this year and a half? I always find that that's illuminating.
Yeah, oh absolutely. I think very early on my husband said something like you're smiling a lot more. So that was like an interesting reflection. And then my mom visits every summer, and she definitely has said like she feels closer to me, um, which is also something like I've been like consciously working on. So like it's yeah. So I think other people sense the shift as well.
Mm.
Beautiful.
I love that.
Awesome. Um, is there any other transformational benefits that you want to share about?
I think maybe going back to kind of like what I'm still working on, and um I do think I have started finding my voice. It might still be a little shaky, that's the word that comes to mind. But I think a part of the transformation is like finding that to like set boundaries when I need to. And so that definitely felt a little impossible before. And I think this has been helpful for me to say like, okay, where is like what am I feeling, what am I sensing that's in my body versus what am I feeling and sensing that someone else might be projecting, how to like create that
Mm.
kind of like distinction between them. And so the one thing that as I've been doing this and learning, and I think Jana, especially, I use language a lot more that helps me shift things. It's been how do I respond versus react.
Mhm.
And so it's a little bit of that slowing down, it's a little bit of that sensing, and yeah, so that's been an interesting transformation. Like I said, still not perfect.
Yeah.
I don't think we will ever be perfect
Uh,
human beings, but because a lot of what I shared earlier was very like still a little bit like physical examples, so I thought like just even this, if how it's helped me mentally and emotionally, is would be good to share.
Beautiful. Yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Thank you for sharing that.
Awesome. And then how would you describe who this care is helpful for? What type of person or what they might be going through?
And what would you tell them about this?
Yeah, I feel like I'm going to give you like my persona, but I think it's the overthinker,
Mm,
the perfectionist, someone who's kind of like used to solving all the problems in their head.
Mm,
And that was my experience, right? Like I thought I could push through anything if I just had like the mental grit to
mm,
do it. Uh and so like I said, I came in for what I thought was like pain relief, and it's just been something deeper. It's been like this like somatic grounding for me.
mm,
And so I think it's for people who live in their head and not in their body. And what I'd say to them is like, I even tell my family, right? Like it might feel a little woo-woo at first. Uh, and also it may not be for everyone, but I think what I want to tell them is give it a real shot, and not just once, right? You have to give it a full season to see the benefit of it. Um and so yeah, and that's when you can decide what sticks, what shifts in you, and whether you want to do it or not do it, but you have to give it time.
mm.
mm.
That's really wise. Yeah, we really recommend that too. And I love how you said that. And going back to what you shared on your first session, it's like the conscious mind is only able to be aware of so much at once,
Yeah.
especially because we're working through the unconscious, we're working through the body, the nervous system. So it's like things that have been ingrained pre-verbally from a young age, right? So if your
Yep.
conscious mind was super aware of all that stuff already, it would have already been resolved and integrated. So the whole thing is that there is a disconnect from the conscious and the unconscious, from the brain and the body. And so it makes sense that there's only so much that people can sense, feel, or be aware of or articulate from one session, or even, for some people, it even might be a month until they really notice what they're noticing. That doesn't mean their body and system isn't already starting to shift, but our capacity to consciously be aware of it, there's sometimes a gap there, which makes sense because we're not going through the mind.
Yeah.
We're going through the body, and then the awareness does grow um, over time. So, yeah, thank you.
And I really love what you shared about just the overthinker, the person thinking that you could like will your way through anything. Like I can totally relate. In the past too, I was the same way, and I feel like that's a common misconception, like in our culture and our world, which is to let the mind lead. And that's really great. Like that's one part of our being, right? We have that capacity to will ourselves, but
Hmm.
disconnected from our body, that it creates a lot of trouble for ourselves because our body is the feedback as we lead ourselves with our mind as we choose. The feedback from our body is really what allows us to come into balance, allows us to stay in harmony,
Yeah.
allows us to get the feedback from ourselves, feedback from our environment. It keeps us in a state of health and wholeness. But without that connection, then it's like the mind can just go wherever, and then everything accumulates in the body. So yeah, I really love that you spoke to that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing your story. Is there any final things
Anytime.
that you wish to share that we didn't get to?
Not that I can think of. I mean, there are always more stories, but I think I shared some of the key ones already.
Awesome. Great. We so appreciate
So
you. Thanks
appreciate
for
you.
I
sharing.
appreciate the two of you. Thank you. This is, for me, this is something that has become, a part of my weekly practice. And I grew up trying to play the piano for a few years, and it reminds me of like this thing of like you don't feel like practicing every day, but you notice when you don't practice that something's missing. And my experience with this now in an ongoing way is like it's hard for me to describe what it means every week. But
Mm,
if I miss a week, if I'm traveling, I can sense that I need to get back to it.
I have a similar
Same
experience,
here,
definitely.
totally. Life is
Yeah,
much different. It's harder without it.
it's more
Yeah.
effortful.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
All
Thank
right.
you so much.
Well, have a good rest of your day, and I'll see you all next week.
Thank